Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Line Graphs with your host, Mr. Miller. All right, third grade pupils. In this lesson, we're going to learn about a little bit about line graphs, what they are, why they're useful, and how to make them. Be prepared to learn about line graphs. One important note about this video, it will be really helpful to utilize the pause feature and the rewind feature on this video when you are stuck on a part. Without any more waiting, let's get to it. So far throughout this unit, you've learned about lots of different types of graphs. Some of the graphs seen here are the bar graph, the line plot, and what we're going to learn about today, the line graph. One of the things we need to ask ourselves is what's similar about line and bar graphs. This would be a great time to practice the pause feature to think about what is similar between line and bar graphs. Pause your video now. Some of the things you might notice that are the same between line graphs and bar graphs are things like both of them have a title and labels down the sides and the bottom. They both have numbers and information going along the sides and the bottom. And the biggest thing is both of them can easily show changes in numbers from when spots are at their highest and when they're at their lowest, like seen here. All line graphs start somewhere, usually with some sort of data table, like this frequency table shown here. The one thing I really want you to look at is how similar our frequency table is to our line graph. If you look closely, you're going to see a lot of the same information in both items. Here are a couple of things that are the same in both items. We have the time. Notice on our line graph, our time is going to be listed across the bottom. Same thing. In this frequency table, we have temperature, and we have temperature in our line graph. Almost always in a line graph, our numbers will go horizontally along the side, like you see right here. Next, let's talk about how we determine where these little points on our line graph come from. They're going to come from our chart over here. We're going to take a look at the very first box. In this very first box, we have the information of 5 a.m. and 40 degrees. Going over to my line graph, I need to find those two pieces of information. I need to find the line that has 5 a.m., like here, and 40 degrees, which is right here. The spot where those two lines meet, 5 a.m. and 40 degrees, is where I put in my point, like you would see here. Once I have put in my point for 5 a.m. and 40 degrees, I move on to the next one. My next one would be 8 a.m. and 50 degrees. Again, my job is to find where the line for 8 a.m. and 50 degrees meets. Right at this point, right here. And so on. I would go 11 a.m. and 60 degrees, all the way until I've done every piece of information in my table. We're going to really quickly take a look at the parts of a line graph. Some of these are going to be similar to things you've seen in line plots and bar graphs. The first one is the title. Okay, always important that you make sure you have your title. So our title is going to be at the top, and it's going to tell us what's in our line graph. The other important things to remember are labels. That's going to tell us the key information that we need to know that's on our graph. The next item is the data. The data is what we're specifically going to look at. We have two spots where we input data. In this graph, we're looking at the number of magazines from 0 to 60 and the days of the week, which are Monday through Friday. The fourth item on our list are the points. Those are the spots where we put in our information. We just put a little dot in the correct places, and those little dots are called points. And finally, once we have all of our points done, we go back and we connect them with a line, which is where the term line graph comes from. One of the things you'll hear the most with line graphs is something called plotting your points. That's where you decide where your points are going to go and you put them on your graph. For example, once I've decided that Monday there were 20 magazines were sold, I find the Monday and the 20 and I do what's called plotting my point. That's when I draw my little circle right in that spot. Now it's time for us to practice together. We're going to take the information from this table and make it into a line graph. After each step, please hit the pause button and complete the same task on your own graph paper. In the end, your graph should look exactly like the one on the screen. Are you ready? Here we go. Remember, use the pause button after each item so that you can copy down what's on this graph. The first thing we're going to start with is a title. The title for our line graph is going to be temperature change. Pause your video now and write in your title. Now we're going to start filling in some of our data. We're going to take the first column of information, which in this case is time, and start placing it along the bottom. Notice how the time only has 6 spots in it, but there's all this room along the bottom. We want to make sure to space these out a little bit, so here's how we're going to do it. We're going to place the 5 a.m. right here. Now we're going to skip a couple lines and place 8 a.m., skip a couple lines, place 11 a.m., skip a couple lines, 2 p.m., 5 p.m., and 8 p.m. Pause the video to get this caught up. Next, we're going to move to the information up the side, and we're going to do sort of the same thing. We'll take the information from the chart in this column right here. We're going to start with 0 degrees and work our way up all the way past 60 degrees because that is what is on our chart. Making sure to skip a couple of lines to ensure that we space out our graph. And here we go. 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and finally the last one, 60 degrees. Pause the video and place your temperatures up the side. We're getting closer. Next up for us is going to be our labels. We have 2 labels that we are going to have to fill in. The first one is the information across the bottom. If we look back at the chart, and we are going to see that the numbers across the bottom are talking about time. So I'm going to put in our time as our label. Next up, we're going to take a look at the label going up and down. The numbers going up the side are referring to temperature. So temperature is going to be our label that we're going to put in right over here. Pause the video to put in your labels. And finally, we're on our last step where we get to plot our points. Again, we're going to use this table right over here and we're going to look at the first box with these 2 pieces of information. We have 5 a.m. and we have 40 degrees. We're going to find where the 5 a.m. meets the 40 degree temperature and we are going to plot a point like so. Next, we're going to move on to 8 a.m. At 8 a.m., the temperature was 50 degrees. Again, I'm going to find the 8 a.m. line and I'm going to go up until it meets with the 50 degree temperature and I'm going to plot a point. I'm going to continue this process until all of my points have been plotted. 11 a.m. and 60 degrees, 2 p.m. and 60 degrees, 5 p.m. and 40 degrees, which is going to go here, and 8 p.m. and 40 degrees. Pause the video and plot your points now. The last thing we need to do is to connect our points. It's just like a connect the dots. We're just going to go from one point to the other in order from the table. Pause the video, connect your points, and there you have it. There is the first line graph that you have made. Before you try making line graphs on your own, there are some important things that you need to remember. We use line graphs to show changes easily. Line graphs make it really easy to see how much information changes from one point to the next. Number 2, titles, label, and data are important. Yes, we want to make sure we get our points and connect those dots, but you cannot forget the titles, the labels, and especially the data. No line graph is complete without them. Number 3, I think, goes without saying. Sometimes you got to remember, math is fun no matter what happens. And lastly, number 4, don't forget to plot your points and connect those dots. Now that you've learned about line graphs, it's time for you to try it on your own. Flip your graph paper over to practice side number 2. Use the information in this table to make your own line graph. If you have questions or are stuck, remember to rewind the video. And just like anything you want to be good at, it takes lots of practice to be good at line graphs. Once you are finished with your line graph, bring it up to your teacher for them to check it over. Now is the time to pause your video and make your own line graph.
Everybody get up, it's time to slam now. We got a real jam going down. Welcome to the Space Jam. Here's your chance, do your dance at the Space Jam. All right.